a sniper. He shot 4 cops. Now you hear it. He's shooting right now.
Even as yesterday I spoke about our need to be concerned as all Americans about racial disparities in our criminal justice system, I also said yesterday that our police have an extraordinarily difficult job.
Trump, to his credit, was very smart at exploiting these kind of opportunities. He's a master at understanding how the media works, more than anybody I've ever seen in politics. And kudos for him for kind of creating the environment and then manipulating the environment to his effect. The tragedy of this, though, is that there isn't going to be a wall built, and Mexico's not going to pay for it.
I intend to do everything I can to make certain she will be the next president of the United States.
Good evening and welcome to Foro Politico. My name is Marcos Palma and this is Latino PBS, free and independent. Today is July 13, a week before the Republican convention. Today we have a lot of things to talk. The last week was horrendous for America, was horrendous for this country. First, we have the killings of 2 African Americans for white police. One of them, Alton Sterling from Louisiana, and the other one, Philando Castile from Minnesota. Then we had a protest in the streets that were organized by this organization, Black Lives Matter. They were screaming in the streets, no justice, no peace. And then the killings of 5 people, 5 police officers. This happened in Dallas, Texas. We're gonna see in this video, this man how start killing, that was a sniper, an army reservist.
Is that a cop dead? Dude, that's a cop down. Dude, that's a cop down.
Yeah, there's 4 cops down.
4?
Yeah, he shot 7 times.
It's a dude?
No, it's a sniper from up here somewhere.
It's a sniper?
Tony, go back to number 4, please. Tony, go back to number 4. Right there. Tony, are you listening what I reading? Okay, if you don't hear what I read, stop it there, okay? Because I have to add something here. For example, on that number 4, I'm going to add the names of the police that were killing.
Pete, there's a sniper out here. There's a sniper. He shot 4 cops. You hear it. He's shooting right now. Can y'all see him? Get back.
That was the killings of 5 police officers in Dallas, Texas, the same city where President John F. Kennedy was killed in 1963. I have to tell you that after that, President Barack Obama, he had to cut his trip from Europe. He was in Poland, but he has to return to give the condolence to the families of those police officers. I have to tell you also that Mr. Obama has been criticized because he did not go to those places where the African Americans were killed in Minnesota and Louisiana. And also we're going to talk today about the presidential election 2016. We're going to give you the latest polls with Mr. Trump is trying to get to Hillary Clinton. You're going to be surprised about these numbers. Also today, we're going to talk about Bernie Sanders. Finally, Mr. Sanders has been endorsed Secretary Clinton. How is going to help that during this campaign? We're going to talk about that. Also, the Stronger Together. It has been the political slogan by Secretary Clinton. And these times where we see in a divided society, where we see in a divided country, we're seeing that slogan, Stronger Together. Also, we're going to talk about the Supreme Court Justice. One of them criticized very bad the Republican candidate. We're going to tell you who and what he said about Mr. Trump. I have to tell you also that next week we will start the Republican convention. Many people have been talking about that it will be a contested convention. And finally, in today's show, we're going to talk about this sheriff, Mr. Arpaio, because he could have his last days in the sheriff's department over there in Maricopa, Arizona. We're going to tell you why. This man that has been following Latinos and minorities because of his scheme, he could be his last day in that department in Arizona, one of the states that is being criticized for being an anti-immigrant state. And today we're going to start with the killings of the African Americans for white people. But before, I have to welcome our panel today. Unfortunately, we have only Mr. Steven Figueroa. Mr. Steven Figueroa, he's been for helping us to doing this television show. And want to welcome and thank you very much, Mr. Figueroa, for being with us.
Thank you very much.
You've been an advocate for immigrants, Mr. Figueroa, and then you've been passing through different stories. And before that we talk about this, the African Americans, I wanted to ask you about, had you experienced any kind of racial profile when you're driving or when you have any cases that you've been, okay, you're Latino, you're out or you're second place or things like that?
Sadly, all too often. 20 years ago was one of the very first times I was pulled over by the San Bernardino County Sheriffs in Victorville and asked to prove my citizenship, not for my driver's license. Another time on the way back in Temecula, I was pulled over by an INS vehicle, asked to prove my citizenship. I guess it goes with the brown skin and the surname and what others perceive, that that if you don't have it, they don't understand it. Not many times in school district meetings representing children, we get off-the-wall comments like, speak English, this is America, or don't bring your gang-banging stuff into our school. And we're professionals. We're professionals and we're representing our clients. And you know, we file the complaints, but all too often, because we have an apartheid system in many school districts and local governments.
But when you mention the apartheid system, explain to people what's the meaning of that, because here in the apartheid is transporting to South Africa with Nelson Mandela. But how does that situation apply here, or how that situation is you've been living in that?
In apartheid is when the minority ruled the majority. The whites were governing the blacks and suppressing the rights. We in California experienced that in many ways. In many small communities, Ontario is a very good example. 80% Latino, and we only have one Latino elected official. Riverside, California is another good example. 75% Latino, and yet only one Latino on the city council. And it's also reflected in the police forces that govern us, where we're disproportionately not hired.
One thing that you mentioned about the disproportion of Latinos and white and the police officers and the firefighters, have you seen any improvements? Have you seen any changes, or not? Or we still in the same as, because remember, the Cesar Chavez, what he fought for very things for the Latinos, but now, that's my question. Is the same or has been changed? We progress?
You know, while there has been progress in some areas, there's been regression in other areas. For instance, while there's been progress in getting out the vote, not as many Latinos are voting. While there's been progress in getting some Latinos elected, there's still in many areas Latinos not being elected in certain towns, even though they're majority, whether they're Democrat or Republican, they won't vote for Latinos. It's across the board, the discrimination. I mean, they'll champion our cause as long as they're our leader.
But what do you think does that happen? The Latinos, they don't care, they don't go to the council meetings, they don't participate in voting, they don't register. What happened? The media does not work, the media doesn't do their job to invite them to participate, to do this kind of things. So what is that?
Disenfranchisement is what it's called, occurs when someone complains and nobody's listening. So they say, why am I complaining? Nobody's listening. So they get discouraged. Oftentimes in the Latino and African American community, where we find our politics is in our churches, and our pastors speak for us. But still, that's not as effective as when the Anglo complains. It does get more attention. People are afraid to say, why are you saying that? Well, if they say something to us and we're offended, they call it, oh, I have to be politically correct. But if we call them on their racism, like we've seen across this country, then they're offended us and we need to go back to our country, which we've never came from.
Do you think that is a bad thing that happened to us that never tried to put in front of something that happened? Because as soon as we heard then or we saw then, we have that mentality that white first.
I'm continuously educating individuals that if you hear racism in the store, at any market or Denny's or whatever, speak up, complain to the manager, put it in writing. It's something that we need to address. that if we see this and hear this on the spot, we cannot let it go by. Our problem is we're too afraid of offending others, and too busy easily taking offense upon ourselves and ignoring it.
What about that thing that you say, white first? White first was a phrase that was used in the 60s and the 70s in those countries. Do you think that is still in the people's mind that say, we cannot raise our hands or speak out and say something against this because it's still that white first is still on the people's mind?
You know, sadly, I still hear it today on occasion. We see it on TV with Donald Trump, and his propaganda is all about white first, supporting David Duke, the Ku Klux Klan member. We see it in our politics. When people run, they don't support Latinos. Why is a Latino Democrat running against a white Democrat? How dare we do such a thing?
Do you think, now talking about Latinos getting in the public service, do you see the Latinos there closer to the Democrats than the Republicans, or you see the same thing?
No, clearly the Latino community is going toward the Democratic Party.
Why? Why?
They're tired of being secondhand citizens, especially the Chicanos. But sadly, there's like 5-10% that are going toward the Republican, but the majority are going toward the Democrats because they're the ones who are saying, I'm willing to carry your hard workers. I'm willing to accept you as you are. The Republicans are saying, you better change in order to fit our mode.
Hey, change what? What did they ask
Change
you
that we're no longer Latino.
How are they going to change? It's to us the African American to be white.
That's what they want.
Black.
That's the best way to put it. They don't want us to be Latino. We can't change the color of our skin.
Then, since you're telling me that, the Republicans, they're never going to make it, or they're going to still have this division in this country because they don't want to set the minorities that still have power in this country.
You know what? Today, 78% of the people in a recent poll I just heard on CNN saying that 73% of whites feel there's too much racism in this country.
73% whites.
Whites. Only 69% of African Americans, and it's like 60% of Latinos. So more whites are siding with us saying there's too much racism by whites against minorities than minorities are saying it. So even those individuals, and I applaud them for saying there's too much racism. So obviously it's a minority of individuals projecting the racism to the rest of us, and the rest of us are kind of fed up.
Talking about racism, talking about this division, talking about discrimination. We've seen this organization, Black Lives Matter. This weekend, the former mayor for New York, Rudy Giuliani, he said, national television, that Black Lives Matter was racism because they're calling to kill police officers because they're spreading hate. What's your take on that? Was it reality, or how do you take Black Lives Matter?
I think that Rudy Giuliani is singing to his audience, to a right-wing conservative group, Donald Trump type politics. That Rudy Giuliani does not know what he's talking about when it comes into racism. He has no idea because he himself, in my opinion, is a racist in the way he's handled his politics. Remember, he's one of the individuals that implemented the search policies in New York that disproportionately targeted Latinos and African Americans. That comes from Rudy Giuliani.
We try to compare, even though maybe it's not this comparison between the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan, and White Lives Matter. Do you think there's a comparison because KKK, they don't want minorities? In this case,
you know what?
Black Lives Matter, they don't want...
I can speak to this because I was the court-appointed advocate to Joseph Hall, whose father was head of the Nazi Party and the Ku Klux Klan in Southern California. I protected this little boy from the Klan. I protected this little boy from the Nazis that were targeting Latinos. So this is an issue that I could speak to quite to because I was in the middle of it. And what I would tell you is that in America, our problem, what Black Lives Matter is doing is they're speaking up, and they're offended because they're speaking up. I wish more Latinos would speak up. When we hear racism going, when they tell us to speak Spanish, we should turn around and tell them, I'm going to complain to the manager. I could speak whatever language I want.
I'm going to ask you, please hold that nice talk. We have to take our first break. I'll be right back. You're watching Foro Politico in TVC Latino PBS. Thank you for joining us. This is Foro Politico. The President Obama was in Dallas, Texas. He spoke at the Dallas Police Memorial Service. He said that he experienced the same racism that we have right now. And also he asked for action because he said no wars, no speeches. He acknowledged also the dangerous work of the police officers.
After tonight, it's scary because it's just like it's two people that got killed by cops. All these cops that died tonight. It's kind of like, and then you got all these people saying because of the people that died by the hands of a cop, you got all these people saying they don't care about the cops that lost their life tonight, and you got people saying they deserved it and stuff like that. So honestly, it's scary just to be around all that.
Even as yesterday I spoke about our need to be concerned as all Americans about racial disparities in our criminal justice system, I also said yesterday that our police have an extraordinarily difficult job, and the vast majority of them do their job in outstanding fashion. I also indicated the degree to which we need to be supportive of those officers who do their job each and every day, protecting us and protecting our communities. Today is a wrenching reminder of the sacrifices that they make for us.
After that day, Mr. Obama traveled to Dallas, Texas. But that night that he was talking is about the shooting of the 5 police officers. And I want to show you the headline from this newspaper, the Desert Sun, that is in the Coachella Valley, and says, "What now?" In this picture, you can have the chief police from Dallas, Mr. Brown, and also some religious leader that they try and unify the country. And then I want to welcome first Mrs. Baca, Victoria Baca. She is a leader in Moreno Valley. She's running for the council. And I want to welcome Mrs. Baca. Thank you very much for joining us.
It's an honor to be here.
Thank you. And I want to start asking you about, first we had the killing of the two African Americans they joined the list of more African American killed by police officers, white police officers. In one of the cases, there was a 4-year-old girl, and he's been criticized badly because the police, he's supposed to know about who was in the car. And there was a lot of anger, there was a lot of hate, and then the killing of the 5 police officers. And now I want to show you that. What now? When you see this, what comes to your mind when you see that? That says, what now? The white people killing African Americans, and then the African American killing police officers.
I think that the picture, it's like someone once said, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And I think that our country is at a point where we need to change. We need to change. And many people had hope with President Obama that things would change. And it's not just the president, because he's African American, that things are going to change. It was wonderful that we had the elections. It was wonderful that America could nominate and elect an African American president. But the problem is in the community. We have a lack of education. We have a lack of jobs. We have a big hole in society where our kids are just falling in. And we need to change. We need to give them something else. We have this mentality that we send our kids from kindergarten to 12th grade and we're all gearing them to college. Not everybody's going to go to college. So what happens to that segment of society that doesn't fall into the plan for college? Okay, we have kids dropping out in middle school. We have kids dropping out, anywhere in high school. We have kids that get all their credits and still cannot earn their high school diploma because they couldn't pass the California high school exit exam. Now that's gone, but who knows what's next? But once our kids leave high school, where do they go? Not everybody's going to go to college. So in Moreno Valley, we're developing a program where our kids are looking at other jobs, other types of jobs, such as logistics. And we're sending them to Norco College. Moreno Valley College just got a grant. So we're trying to bring back technical education, not the one-size-fits-all, go to college track.
You live in Moreno Valley, since you're trying to get a position in Moreno Valley. I think so you deal with African American more than myself that live in the Coachella
Yes.
Valley. Have you seen any kind of situation like this, like African American being humiliated or being discriminated for white police? Something happened like that in that area?
Yes, yes, we have that. And the latest issue, I know Steve Figueroa remembers, it was the Raymond Johnson incident that took place right down the block from my house at the Burger King restaurant, where the police, already had subdued the suspect, and another officer, who happened to be white, climbed over the car and just started stomping on the person's head until they killed him. And the family sued, and I believe that Riverside Sheriff paid out about $500,000 to that family. And so it happens.
That situation, Mr. Figueroa, not just only police officers, but we've seen in daily lives. For example, a guy, a worker from this station, this morning, he went to one of the coffee, I don't want to say the name of the brand of the coffee store, but he went to the store and he asked one of the guys, a white guy, excuse me, are you in line? And the guy replied to him and told him, why first? And he did not know what to do. He was shocked at that time. But then he went back and asked the same question to this guy, excuse me. But at this time, this guy, they had his telephone to say, okay. And then the white guy, he didn't want to talk anymore. What can we do it to those things? Not just when they told you why first, but for example, if you go to the store or if we go in public place and they say, speak English, what should we do it?
Much education needs to be done. During the 60s, Martin Luther King invoked on a national education project to teach African Americans and others how to respond appropriately, non-violently, but to complain and respond. So a lot of education. In that particular case, I would encourage that individual, if it happens again, you speak up right then and there. Manager, somebody is being racist to me. This person just told me this. You make the scene. You make it. And we have to. We're so often confronted, say, speak English, even if we are speaking English. We're so often confronted with stereotypes based on our race. We have to learn to speak up, just like Martin Luther King taught, just like Cesar Chavez taught, nonviolent. This is how you respond to when others are being racist to you, when the police pull you over. Many of the people I have advocated for are law enforcement officers. I was and still support the National Latino Police Officers Association. Many Latinos and African Americans find it very difficult to increase the ranks. What we saw in Dallas from that chief of police was called leadership. Leadership, pulling his community together, regardless of color, to bring it together, say, we are all one. So what we need is our so-called leaders who are appointed, whether they be police or elected, to be the real leaders and bring our communities together and to provide workshops on what do you do when the police pull you over. So we're not fighting these situations.
Do you see two Americas? Do you see the white and the black America? Even though the minorities, they're on their levels because they don't have the same opportunities, they don't have the same jobs, they don't have the money that whites have. Do you see that difference big? And then that's why we have this kind of situation?
President Obama said he doesn't see a divided America. While I see, if you heard America, we all get together, we're united, but I do see a divided America. I see four Americas. I see a white and minority America. I see a rich and poor America. I see an immigrant and citizen America. And I see a disabled and non-disabled America. And is there bigotry and discrimination on these various areas? Of course. And while the majority is suppressing the minority, I believe there's enough room to go around that perhaps we all need to wash our hands.
Mrs. Baca, I'm going back to you. Do you have the opportunity to watch the speech for Mr. Obama in Dallas, Texas, when he told to the police officers and he sent his condolences to the families of the police officers?
Yes.
What's your take on the speech?
Well, I'm a fervent believer and supporter in our President Obama. I'm very proud of him. I think he's done so much for this country. And I think that it was his obligation to make this speech and his condolences. And I think that a lot of people, a lot of Americans, including myself, send our condolences to these officers. I don't believe that they were guilty of anything except doing their job. They were doing their job. They were, on work hours, and they didn't deserve to die that way. I think that that was cowardly. No one had a right to take their life. I mean, there was somebody's son, somebody's husband, somebody's brother, their uncle, fathers. It was a shameful way of this man.
Yeah,
this criminal, the shooter.
That he made is not right. It's not justice.
No.
And then
you can't justify it.
Excuses for doing
You just
that.
can't justify that.
And even though we have to remember that the police departments through the whole country, most of the police officers, they're good.
Yes.
There's only few percent.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And we need to teach our children, since they're young, to respect authority, to respect the police. We need to teach our children, whether, if you're in a bad mood, it doesn't matter. You still have to respect authority, just like your parents. Because when they're out in the community, the police are adults and they need to respect them. When they're at school, they need to respect the teachers. They're their parents at school. These are things that need to be taught.
It's a very good point, even though for immigrants like myself.
Everybody.
Once a police said, we have to follow their orders.
Yes.
And we have to follow
there's
that
going to be exceptions.
Exactly,
Marco.
but even though if you live in Arizona, with one of the most discriminatory states in the United States, but also no matter what, Stephen, as an advocate, we have to be passionate and follow the orders. I like one thing when they say, sir, yes, sir. Answer that question, yes, sir. Being humble to them. Because the law is the law.
No one addresses Joe Arpaio more than me, and I think that's evident. But I still exercise my First Amendment right, just like they champion their Second Amendment right, which I too support. But we have a First Amendment right. While we respect authority, we have the right to petition our government for grievances and express our grievances to their face, in their face, even if they don't like it. Nobody says, let's throw punches. Nobody says, let's go to jail. Nobody, although I have been to jail on civil disobedience.
Tell me an example quickly, Stephen, Mr. Figueroa. Tell me an example where you had been stopped by a police officer and you have a discussion. How did they approach you? And then you have a discussion.
I was pulled over in Victorville on what was supposed to be a DUI stop, and the officer asked me for my green card and not my license. And I said, excuse me. He was very serious. I asked him for his card. He wouldn't give it to me. He repeated that if I didn't provide a green card, he was going to violate me for a PC 148, which was interfering with an officer. And I said, you have my license. I would like your card.
How to eliminate the bias from police officers? Because it's in their minds, it's in their training, or
it comes from good administration that will not tolerate it. I credit Chief Charlie Beck in Los Angeles, who refuses to tolerate racism in his force, and he takes action. Now, the rank and file don't like it, but a good leader will turn around and say, I heard this has happened, this is your fourth complaint, you're out of here.
Mrs. Baca, what solution can we have in order to try to avoid this confrontation with the police officers? Could be training.
It's training on both sides, though, on both sides.
Could be videos, could be the education for the kids, no matter if they're African Americans, they're Latinos, they're Russian. How can we do this better?
I think that more and more police departments are going with the cameras, so I think that's going to help. And that is to protect both, because many times people could file complaints, and then you listen to the video, and it's not what it didn't happen that way. And sometimes they do. Sometimes it does justify that, and the police officer is out of line. But I believe that the education is on both sides. We need to educate the community, on civil rights, on respect for authority, respect for a police officer, and on the other side, we need to have some kind of interrelation with the police department and the community, the parents, the teachers, the elected officials, and we need to come to terms that we're all here to live in peace. We don't want trouble. We don't. And I don't think that the police want to be in trouble. I mean, they don't want to go to a family dispute. That's not what they want to do. They don't want, I don't think that they're out to beat up anybody. I don't. But situations get out of hand. Someone's in a bad mood, someone had a bad day, and everything goes south. And we have problems. But there is a solution, and the solution is education.
It takes time, everything, to achieve that. Thanks God that we're growing and we're getting to that level, because we don't see in the situation like in the 60s, the civil rights movement. We don't see this, and we don't want to see that. And we need to try to join, we try to summarize more people, ideas, participation. We need a community work with the police officers. We are going to take another break, but I'll be right back. You're watching Foro Politico. You're watching Foro Politico, free and independent. Finally, Mr. Sanders endorsed Secretary Clinton. There was a deal about college students, about health care reform, and others. Let's watch this video.
Secretary Clinton has won the Democratic nominating process. And I congratulate her for that. She will be the Democratic nominee for president, and I intend to do everything I can to make certain she will be the next president of the United States. I have come here today not to talk about the past, but to focus on the future. That future will be shaped more by what happens on November 8th in voting booths across our nation than by any other event in the world. I have come here to make it as clear as possible as to why I am endorsing Hillary Clinton.
Finally, Mr. Sanders endorsed Mrs. Clinton. As you can see, some people think that he could be the VP, but I'm going to ask you, Mr. Figueroa, do you think that will be good between Mr. Sanders and Secretary Clinton? Because we've seen that Mr. Sanders, a lot of people follow him, millions and millions of people. One of the things that I like about him is about the ideological revolution that he created, because your people, maybe they were not interested in politics, but after they saw Mr. Sanders, they start to be involved in politics.
While there are many viable candidates out there, like Julian Castro, the governor from West Virginia, would it be good? It would be good. It would bring some unification. Will I think it happen? I do not think Bernie Sanders will be the VP. It'll be a shock to me if it does occur. But it goes beyond that. Hillary needs to win the South, and Sanders didn't carry the South. And right now, in a recent poll I saw on CNN again, 83% of the voters that voted for Sanders will more than likely vote for Hillary Clinton. When the numbers were reversed, when Hillary ran against Obama, it was only 69%. So right now, more Sanders voters are going to vote for Hillary than Hillary voters voted for Obama. 9% of Bernie Sanders supporters say they will vote for Trump. So here again, at that time, I think it was like almost 21% of the people that voted for Hillary ended up voting for John McCain at the time. So right now, more people are supporting Hillary, regardless of who she chooses, because Trump has offended so many.
Mrs. Baca, we have seen that actually Secretary Clinton was waiting for this moment. because we've seen in the primaries the way that they attack each other. But it's part of the politics. It's part of the process. Because some people, they say, oh, they were we're not insulting each other, but they were fighting for the ideological, the way that they think that will be the country. But finally, as a Democrat, when you see that old man, wise man, try to endorse Mrs. Clinton, what's your take?
Well, it's just history repeating itself. That's the American way. That's what we do. Back 8 years ago, it was Clinton versus Obama. And Obama was a nominee, and Mrs. Clinton endorsed him and worked with him, and then she became the Secretary of State for the United States. Now we have Ms. Clinton, Secretary Clinton, and Bernie Sanders. The only difference here is that Sanders took a longer time to endorse her. And I believe it's because they were negotiating the political platform that we're going to have at the Democratic National Committee. And he pretty much forced her. He forced her to look at the issues. And that didn't happen before because Clinton and Obama were pretty much on the same platform. So that's the difference today. So I believe that the Bernie Sanders, the true Democrats, that we're going to vote for Clinton. I mean, I've been a Clinton supporter since day one, since 8 years ago. But I supported Obama the last 8 years, of course, because I'm a Democrat. And this time, it only took longer, but I believe that the Sanders people will elect the first woman president of the United States.
Well, we've seen today in UK about Theresa May,
believe it?
that she became
Can you
maybe the
believe
next
that?
Margaret Thatcher.
Yeah. So,
and now
we're behind the UK because they've already had Margaret Thatcher.
Okay.
So this is going to be our first female
We will
president.
find out in November the 8th, but I want to ask you this. In case Secretary Clinton becomes the next president of the United States.
She is.
Would you like,
You mean
we don't know. We
when?
don't know.
When?
We don't know yet. But would you like to see Mr. Bernie Sanders in one of the positions in the cabinet?
No.
What would you like to happen to Mr. Bernie Sanders?
I think that he will be a staunch supporter of the Democratic Party, and I think that he'll be there. He's a senator now, and perhaps he'll be another Secretary of State or some type of ambassador. But I don't think that he will be the vice president.
Not the vice president,
No.
but would you like to see him in other positions? And another position
Yeah, I think he's very good for the community. I think he's too much of a socialist for me. I believe, I like what he said. I just don't see that it's feasible because he wants free everything.
But don't you think that it was necessary for the Democratic Party? Because I haven't seen since I live in the Coachella Valley, I haven't seen any candidate to travel all the way.
I like what he did.
Because who's with the people?
Yes.
He talks to the people.
Yes.
And sometimes the Democrats
But
in
the
the offices.
what does the vice president do?
He follows what the president does. He supports what the
Do you ever
president
see-
does.
do you
In
ever-
case the president is not, the vice president will be there.
But they're very silent. And Mr. Sanders should not be put in a position
Very
to be
silent, but they take action. Remember Dick Cheney? Remember Dick Cheney?
Nah.
Remember Dick Cheney?
Yeah, but
vice president.
Yeah,
Even though they're the
how
white
can we
people.
forget Dick Cheney?
Yeah. No.
Dick Cheney arguably ran this country, not George Bush.
I wanna.
I think that, yes, he should have a position. He should have a very strong position, but it should be with the community.
Now I want to show you part of this exclusive interview from Mr. Jeb Bush. He have exclusive with MSNBC, and this very important things that he said about Mr. Trump.
Trump, to his credit, was very smart at exploiting these kind of opportunities. He's a master at understanding how the media works, more than anybody I've ever seen in politics. And kudos for him for kind of creating the environment and then manipulating the environment to his effect. The tragedy of this, though, is that there isn't going to be a wall built, and Mexico's not going to pay for it. And there's not going to be a ban on Muslims. None of that is, this is all like a alternative universe that he created. The reality is that's not going to happen. And people are going to be deeply frustrated, and the divides will grow in our country. And this extraordinary country, still the greatest country on the face of the earth, will continue to stagger instead of soar. And that's the heartbreaking part of this, is I think people are going to really feel betrayed.
People feel betrayed. In the convention, they're not going to be Mr. Romney, they're not going to be the Bush family, they're not going to be McCain and many Republican leaders. What kind of convention can we expect from that Republicans, Mr.
A
Figueroa?
reality TV show. Since the beginning,
I never expect the answer, believe me. I never.
since the beginning of Trump, he realized it's all about ratings. So I'm going to say the wackiest, craziest things because CNN's ratings are down, MSNBC's ratings are down, and now they're higher than ever because Trump says the most racist, outrageous things, and they go, can you believe the presidential candidate said this?
Yeah.
And it's front news, and everybody's atoned to it. We can't believe that somebody who's running for president would say such a thing.
Right. I agree. And it's ridiculous. And he hit the nail on the head. It's going to be reality TV. But my question is, what now? We're going to have the election in November. And Hillary Clinton's going to win. And you don't have the Republican Party united. And that's,
Well, as a Democrat, it's good for you because since you have a consecutive convention over there, it's fine
I'm not worried. I'm not worried, in my heart and my soul and my mind. I'm just wondering out loud what's going to happen to the Republican Party.
And what's going to happen also with the
Trump is the worst thing
with the
that can
Black
happen.
Lives Matter? Can you believe that they having the convention and then upside people protesting because the protest is still happening?
Yes.
We have today.
Yeah, and it's
in different
unfortunate
states.
because we need to address what's going on with the African American black community. To me, I call the community, the black community, they call themselves Black Lives Matter because when I grew up in 1968, I was in Mexico City when they did the Black Power salute. I was alive when Black is Beautiful was there. So, to me, they're black people, and a lot of people my age call themselves black. Other people call themselves African American because, it's politically correct. But I don't like any name that's hyphenated with American because I'm American. Donald Trump insulted the judge and called him a Mexican when he was an American. When Jenny Rivera died, they said a Mexican singer. She was American. The judge is American.
Well, for him,
the Muslims that Trump is attacking, they're Americans.
You were
Sorry,
say
but
something.
I'm a Chicano.
Yeah.
Through and through, okay?
Then
I'm a
another
Chicana.
division.
I'm a
Then
Chicana. I
another
identify as a
division.
Chicana.
Then
but
you have to explain that to Mr. Trump.
Yeah. At the
You're
end of
not
the day, we're
Mexican,
Americans.
You're not African American.
We're talking about people that are born in the United States. Yes, Chicanos are a different type of Americans because they're people that have a conscience of who they are, where they came from.
We have generations.
Yes.
But what
remember,
happened?
this is once we're
But
the
believe me,
descendants
that will be
of
for
the
another.
Mexicans.
That will be for another show to talk about
Okay.
that kind of situation
Yes.
because there's people that they have no identity.
Right.
I remember Edward James Olmos, the famous actor, that he
Yes.
mentioned once. If he goes to Mexico, they don't like him because the way he does not speak
He said
Spanish.
that was in the movie
And
Selena.
he speaks in the United States. They don't like because his
Right.
color scheme. And then what is that situation?
Right.
But that should be avoided.
Yes.
That would be the same for
Well, how
African
are we
Americans.
supposed to assimilate when I can't change the color of my skin?
And how can we assimilate when you speak the same way that people speaking here? If you go to Mexico, how do you feel, Mr. Figueroa? If you cross the border, say who you are, where you coming from. You got to explain to him all the story from the Chicano movement, from 60s, from 70s.
Even
you
now,
will spend
when I
time.
went to Europe, and when I go anywhere, no one can identify. I dress like a Chicano. I am
And what
a
did they
Chicano,
tell you? You're Mexican?
and
How do they recognize you? That
I've
first
been
thing that
called
came to your mind?
everything from an Italian, a Persian.
But not American.
Never an American.
No,
But
I've been called a
when
Persian.
I tell them, when I've been telling them I'm a Chicano, people really don't understand because I guess the OGs, the old guys still know what the Chicano is. The new second and third generations from the 80s, 90s, they can't identify. They think Cesar Chavez was a boxer still. He was, but they don't know who
That's
Cesar
another
Chavez.
Cesar Chavez. That's a Julio Cesar Chavez. There are two Julio Cesar Chavez and Cesar Chavez, the other one. Now, talking about Mr. Trump, do you see that he's getting closer to Mrs. Clinton? Because I want to talk about the latest
Closer
polls.
as far as what?
In the polls, because the polls, I want to talk about, according to Maclet Maris, one of the polls, in the general election, Mrs. Clinton is 42 against Trump 39. That's for general election. And for example, in another poll by Quinnipiac University in Pennsylvania State, Clinton 41, Trump 43. In Ohio, Clinton 41, Trump 41. They're tied over there in Ohio. In Florida, according to Quinnipiac, Trump 42, Clinton 39. As
Is
you can
this
see,
the,
in other states, the
is
latest
this
for
the,
July 13.
is this
For
the
July
popular
13,
votes?
the latest poll.
But
The latest poll.
of the voters?
Of the voters, registered voters, as you can see, is tied in some states. For example, Ohio is close right now. It's very tight, that election. And weeks before, we have seen that Mrs. Clinton was ahead, 6 points, but now it's getting closer. Do you think
This is called the convention bump.
Okay.
Generally, before any convention, that party seems to rise a little. It happens at every, so it's definitely known Trump is having a convention bump, but not as significant as McCain did or Romney did. So this is just typical convention bump. It's nothing to make a big deal, because when Hillary has her convention, you're going to see those numbers really rise, especially after Donald Trump chooses
Opens his
somebody like,
mouth.
after he chooses Chris Christie or Gerald Pyle for his vice president.
Or Newt Gingrich.
well,
And then we'll have the Family Values
The
team.
Six Wives Club.
we have to take
Family Values Club.
I have to take another break, guys. I'll be right back. You're watching Foro Politico. When we come back, we're going to talk about this comment by the Supreme Court. He said something about Mr. Trump, and then Mr. Trump said that she had to resign. I'll be right back. Thank you for joining us once again. This is the last segment from Foro Politico. In this segment, we're going to talk about this comment by the judge from the Supreme Court, Ruth Ginsburg, that she slammed Mr. Trump. She called him a faker. And now Mr. Trump is asking for her resignation. And I have to tell you also that some Republicans and Democrats, they're being criticized Mrs. Ginsburg, because they said that she crossed the line. Mr. Figueroa, did she cross the line? A Supreme Court justice shouldn't talk about politics. They shouldn't mention any comments. What's your take?
Anthony Scalia did it all the time.
And he's dead.
All the time. Yeah, and he's dead. So,
But was his friend.
it was
from Mrs.
common.
Ginsburg.
Clarence Thomas still does it now and then. So it's not uncommon. They don't lose their First Amendment right just because they're a judge. And they could still.
But don't you think that they're crossing the line, because this is the three power, the executive, the judiciary, and then the legislature?
Not at all. Anthony Scalia, there's a long history, especially in this United States, when it even came to racism. One of the Supreme Court judges in the 30s was a Ku Klux Klan member. There's a long history of Supreme Court judges speaking their mind and their piece. And so,
But this is going to affect the electoral board. It's going to affect the elections.
I hope it does. I hope it does, to vote against, to vote to.
But don't you think so that she did it because of her age, that he's 83 years old, and then she doesn't care about what happened in the Supreme Court, or she really felt that when they called faker?
I think she knows she has a following, and if she speaks up, her following is.
As a woman, Mrs. Baca, does she has a guts to say that? She doesn't care about it.
Right.
This is what happened.
Right.
No matter
And you got to
what.
remember that her position is lifelong. She'll be there till she dies.
Yes.
So she's not worried about being nominated or anything. She's not going to be censored. She's not going to be impeached. You know, she has nothing to lose.
But we're going to be, who's going to be next? Maybe the next Supreme Court, we have an Hispanic lady, I forgot her last name, Sotomayor. What about, she said something about also Mr. Trump, because she's a Latina, and Mr. Trump insulted Latinos. Then we're going to lose the credibility between the powers.
How?
Well, in that case, the Supreme Court is talking about issues. They're going to talk and support candidates and start supporting ideas.
I don't think that she was attacking anything coming before the Supreme Court. So I think she's safe there, because there's really nothing that Trump has before the Supreme Court. And I think that, in my honest opinion, I think that Donald Trump is so disgusting, even to the Republicans, that they can't support him. And they're so ashamed of him because of his stupidity. He shoots from the hip. His thoughts never go through the brain. And I think that the justice is just so tired of it that she spoke out. And she even went on national television to explain what she meant. And I think that she means it. And I thank God that there's people with guts in high places that are willing to take a stand against someone that can absolutely not represent the United States of America anywhere.
There is precedence. every time a Supreme Court, every decision they make is political. Citizens United is political. Who can donate to campaigns? Abortion is political. Every decision the Supreme Court make ultimately is
I want to say
political.
something, Mr. Figueroa. Mrs. Ginsburg said those comments before in UK we had First Minister Theresa May. And came to my mind that it's maybe consolidating those ideas between the women. They have to speak out and say something.
It's a year of the woman.
Could be. We do not know yet. I know that you want it. I want to, before we finish that show, I want to ask you about Mr. Joe Arpaio. Since we have lived in this situation, a community that is divided in the African American and the whites, and also now in the Latino community, also we've seen these things very strong in Arizona State. And you said that you've been speaking to Mr. Joe Arpaio.
I think I called him a Nazi to his face. I told him he was worthless. He was a bum. He was a white supremacist. I have no, and that was my First Amendment right. He's an elected official. I'm speaking on his discriminatory policies as I explained it right 2 inches from his nose.
He's going to be in the court in July the 22nd.
And prosecuted.
And prosecuted. And then
On
people
contempt
say,
of court.
And then not just
And if you
remove
go
his
back
position.
to May, I believe it's May 28th, 2012, I told him, I predicted his being held on contempt. I predicted it. I said, you would be arrested on contempt of court. And Chris Baca said that you'll be wearing the pink underwear.
We have not a lot of time, but thank you very much, Mrs. Baca. It's an honor to have you.
It's
Mr.
an honor to be
Figueroa,
here.
and I want to ask you the last question to you. Yes, please tell me in 20 seconds a good thing that will happen in the Republican convention next week.
A good thing?
A good
I
thing
think
that happened.
The good thing is that the dynasties, the Bushes, the Romneys, and other strong Republican leaders will not be there.
The same question to you, Mr. Figueroa. A good thing that happened next week in the Republican convention.
The riots that are going to happen outside will not occur inside.
Thank you very much for being with us. Thank you very much, Mr. Figueroa. Mrs. Baca, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much on behalf of everybody that makes possible Foro Politico. Good night and see you soon.